Hi everyone, and welcome to D&D Horror Stories with D&D Doge. In today's video, we have a story about a player's boyfriend introducing her to D&D. But after they break up, the boyfriend can't seem to face reality. And then we have a story about why it may not be a great idea to get into paid Dungeons & Dragons games. So without further ado, let's get into these D&D horror stories. Player hijacks a player character in order to keep role-playing an in-real-life relationship after it ends. By Reddit user Coastal Toast. This is the story of my first true foray into D&D, and the calamitous relationship that led me to it. I grew up in a conservative town, in a hyper-religious family that fully bought into the satanic panic rhetoric around Dungeons & Dragons back in the 80s and 90s, and absolutely forbade any of the books from crossing our threshold. Naturally, this made me seek them out immediately. As soon as I cracked them open, I was hooked. You mean I could play collaborative make-believe with other people? Tabletop RPGs, where have you been all of my life? In practice, it was a bit more complicated than that. The few friends I had were religious, and if I took out a D&D book in their presence, I would be labeled as a, quote, corrupting influence, and we'd have to do a whole laying on of hands to pray the demons out, etc. And the kids who played at school were very much of the mindset that having mammary glands immediately disqualified you as a participant. So I was sort of stuck. Here I was, knowing this cool thing existed, but having no one to play it with, and I desperately wanted to play. Fast forward to college. I've gone low contact with my hyper-religious family. I'm in my own place, and I'm starting to work through some heavy emotional stuff. You know, the stuff you can only really start walking through once you get out of a bad situation. I'm not in the best place mentally, but I'm making positive changes. Enter Badgering Bard. I met Badgering Bard on campus, and we shared a couple of classes. I'm not the most observant when people are romantically interested, but with BB, it became obvious pretty quickly. I tried to reject him subtly at first, but clearly, this guy was not getting the hint. So I met with him and said in no uncertain terms that I was not looking for anything romantic. I was happy being single and working on myself, and I would appreciate if he could respect that. His response? Well, I'm a few years older than you and have my life figured out. And from where I'm standing, it looks to me like you don't know what you want. Jeez, what a douche. In that moment, what I wanted to do was kick him in the shins, but I left it at, quote, I'm not interested. Thanks. Bye. And left. But oh no, it did not stop there. Badgering Bard stuck around. He sat next to me in class, found where I was studying, and even came to my house because it turned out he was friends with my roommate. And I'm ashamed to say it, but after 4 months of BB constantly hanging around and testing the waters every month or so to see if I'd say yes this time, he wore me down. Well, I can see why OP called him Badgering Bard. I know. I wasn't in a great place mentally, remember? I genuinely thought he would get bored and move on, and I could be free of his constant presence, just buzzing around everywhere. I thought it was a weird conquest thing for him. Like once he, quote, got me, he would realize that I'm actually not that exciting and just flit to the next thing he would start obsessing over. And that's kind of what my roommate led me to believe as well, seeing as he was somewhat familiar with BB's dating history. 2 months in, and this dude is not letting up. But what he is doing is establishing a pattern of giving me the illusion of choice. For example, he'll ask me, what do you want for dinner? And I'll say, Indian food. And he would say, we could get Indian food, or we could get insert whatever choice he wants that we inevitably end up getting. When I push back, it turns into an argument. And I point out that arguing this much early on doesn't bode well for a long-term relationship. Immediately after that comment, that I don't think we're a good match long-term, BB invites me to join his good buddies for a D&D campaign. Thwap, right in the weak spot. I'm immediately skeptical. A, I haven't met these friends. What if they are similar to BB? Then I will be increasing my suffering fourfold. B, a campaign is a long-term commitment in and of itself, and I absolutely do not know if I want to be in the same space as BB consistently moving forward. But then again, C, it's Dungeons and Mother Effin' Dragons. I've been waiting years to find people to play with, and now I've been invited to the table. I agreed to come meet everyone for session 0 and see if we clicked. BB's friends? They were incredible. Our dungeon master had created a rich homebrew world and was excited to answer all of my questions. And everyone was extremely patient as I got up to speed with the newly released 4th edition, which was what they were planning to run. I rolled up a fighter because everyone else had established their characters already, and they desperately needed a meat shield. And as a new player, I wanted something mechanically light. I made Charisma my dump stat and established my fighter as more of a grunter than a talker, so if he were to disappear from the campaign suddenly, it wouldn't be seen as a big loss roleplay-wise. I had it all planned out, but I freaking loved playing with those guys. In their everyday lives, they were dudes who were shy and a little awkward, but at the gaming table, they came alive. The imagination and creativity that poured out into every encounter was truly incredible. BB, on the other hand, had elected himself as the party face, and was often just as grating in-game as he was in real life. At the 3-month mark, BB and I were out at dinner, and he began to flirt with our server in front of me. She had a book tucked in her apron with the title visible, and he tells her that he loves that book, and he should get her number so they can talk about it sometime. This is a particularly crappy move, considering I had introduced him to said author. Without batting an eye, I told him I'm going to follow the advice I would give any friend if they had told me their significant other had flirted with a server in front of them at a restaurant, paid for the soda I ordered when I sat down, and left. He chased after me with some sob story about how he only did that because he thought I was getting bored in the relationship, and to please give him another chance, but I kept walking. Wait a minute. So this dude thinks his girlfriend is possibly going to break up with him, so his move in order to have that not happen is to flirt with another woman in front of her. Genius move. I got home to a long, pleading voicemail of him threatening to self-harm if I left him, and being a young person struggling with my own mental well-being, that really effed me up, so I stayed. Wow, what a scumbag. I always hate it when people use self-harm as a way to threaten and manipulate people. Not only do they usually not mean it, but it takes away from people that actually have those thoughts and will prevent them from seeking help due to the stigma of people thinking that people that talk about it won't actually do it. That's just really disgusting. But at least I had D&D. Well, sort of. Every time we leveled up, BB would come up with a list of suggested feats that I take for my character, and that illusion of choice would creep back in. I would make my choice, and he would start again by saying, "You could choose that, or..." Our campaign was a grand adventure, but my relationship was becoming more and more problematic. I became convinced that BB wasn't listening to a word I said most of the time. I came to find that he had planned out our entire future together, complete with a detailed 5-year plan, without once consulting me. Although I had been very clear on my stance of no kids, no marriage, he started trying to find out my ring size. There was no way I was going to be so passive that I wound up trapped in a marriage just so I could keep playing D&D. That would be insane. Thankfully, I had to move away to continue my education, and so I had a perfectly reasonable reason to extricate myself from this relationship. I waited until we had our D&D session to give my fighter one last hurrah before I moved. Then I took BB out to break the news, and I tried to break up with him. Oh boy, did I try. But no matter how many ways I said it, BB just chose not to hear it. It was the most bizarre thing. It's like he just selectively chose not to accept that particular reality and kept acting as though we would talk again when I got to my destination safely and continue long distance, as though that was obviously the plan we discussed. But we didn't discuss it. I broke up with him. Man, talk about being in deep denial. I was at a loss as to what to do. I could understand being upset by news that you don't want to hear, but just pretending as though you don't hear it was not a tactic I was yet familiar with. So I wrote him a Dear John letter, thinking that maybe seeing it in written form would help it sink in. He kept calling and sending regular emails that I did not respond to or open, and just cut off all contact. During this time, I didn't reach out to any of my former D&D group. It didn't feel appropriate to do so, seeing that they were all BB's friends, and it felt like it might be intrusive for me to make contact after the breakup. I figured I'd hear from them if I heard from them, but if I didn't, I would understand why, and would simply cherish the time we had playing together. Fast forward to the better part of a year later. The first year of my post-degree is done, and I'm back visiting some buds. And who do I run into? The DM from our campaign. He seems surprised but delighted that I'm back in town, and he immediately asks if I have enough time to drop in for an evening to play D&D while I'm in town. The following conversation ensues. Me. I obviously loved playing with all of you, but I don't know if that's such a good idea, given the circumstances. DM. Circumstances? Me. Well, Badgering Bard and I haven't spoken since the breakup, and I've been trying to give you all space since then. DM. Wait, back up. You and BB broke up? When? Me. When I left town. DM. Wait, as in a year ago? No, wait, what? He's been playing your character. He said you told him you wanted him to level up for when you came back. Me, with a long-suffering sigh. Okay, tell me what he told you. Apparently, Badgering Bard had bought himself a one-way ticket on the denial train and had no intention of getting off at a stop anytime soon. He had told the D&D group that we were still together, but that I was impossibly busy with schoolwork, so don't expect to hear from me. He also told them that I was relaying my choices for feats each level up to him so he could keep my character up to date because I was, quote, eager to rejoin the campaign the moment I returned. Note, I didn't know where I would end up after graduation, but had no plans to move back to my college town. Occasionally, he would roleplay my character and his own if the story called for it, all in an effort to, I don't know, keep me around in spirit? Convince me to come back to him? I still don't really know what the endgame was. Eventually, he must have known the charade was going to fall apart. Ultimately, it isn't my responsibility to figure out what was going on in his head. And truthfully, I'll probably never know. I told DM the truth. let him know that he may have to handle BB with kid gloves when he confronts him about it, because there had been threats of self-harm in the past, and passed on the contact info for 2 of my buds who had heard tale of our campaign hijinks and were interested in trying tabletop RPGs for themselves, though I did not return to that table. I don't know how that confrontation went, and I don't think it's my place to know. I do know that DM reached out to my 2 friends, and they became regulars at his table for a different campaign. And regardless of the train wreck of a relationship that brought me there, I'm forever grateful for my first DM and party for opening up a world that was just out of reach for so many years. We often see the adage, no D&D is better than bad D&D, in this subreddit, and those are very wise words. Though in my case, the D&D was great, but the relationship that led me to it was not. So I offer up my own adage. Great D&D is not worth staying in a crappy relationship for. Wow, that is actually kinda sad. For someone to be that much in denial of a breakup that they kept playing their ex's character in a D&D campaign and lying about OP being in touch with him to tell him how to level up her character. I can only imagine the embarrassment that BB must have felt after the DM found out about this whole charade and confronted him about it. Though, with the way BB sounded, I think OP is pretty lucky that he didn't start stalking her or anything like that, because what BB did is the type of behavior that someone like that would do. At least OP is looking on the bright side of this whole thing, and still appreciates the DM and other players for giving her her first foray into D&D. And hopefully, OP eventually found a new group to play with wherever she wound up. But with that, it looks like we have time for one more story. But before we get into that, here's a kitty to try to convince you to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Kitties always work, right? But anyway, let's get into today's final story. I got kicked out from a campaign that I paid for, by Reddit user Gozgav. Context: I've been playing D&D for the past 8 years. I've played with all kinds of groups, though I prefer game mastering, but I seem to be cursed when it comes to Curse of Strahd. I've started this module 4 times as a player, and every campaign has fallen apart due to the classic D&D nemesis, scheduling. Recently, I joined StartPlaying.Games, hoping that by paying for a spot in a campaign with 4 strangers, I'd finally make it to the end. I figured everyone would be committed, and then I could even try GMing it myself. Boy, was I wrong. Deep into our Curse of Strahd campaign, session 22, of which I have played 18, I get a private message from the GM on his personal Discord. Here's a brief summary of our conversation. GM: I've noticed some metagaming. Could you tone it down a bit? I was surprised. I didn't think I had been metagaming. I had told the Game Master before joining that I'd only played the beginning of the campaign before, and we were well past that point. I don't know any specific NPCs, items, or quests beyond what we've encountered. Still, I was curious about what they meant by metagaming. Me: could you be more specific about what I did? It's hard to tone down if I don't know what I did wrong. At this point, I was wondering if maybe I'd just relied too much on general D&D knowledge. GM: Well, I don't have any specifics, but I noticed there were small cases where you made decisions and leaps that would make sense only if you read 100% of the module. Me: I don't understand where I could have done that. If you give me some details, maybe I can analyze what type of knowledge my character should not have. I still don't know what the situation was. A day later, GM. I think maybe the cases of metagaming were just coincidences. More importantly though, I've realized your expectations don't align with the type of campaign I'm running. Curse of Strahd isn't the political intrigue module you might be looking for. Also, it's really frustrating when a player seems disinterested in the plot elements presented to them. Your character also isn't showing the heroism traits. When your character threatened Irina with a knife in front of Strahd, it just didn't fit into the campaign that I am running. I replied with some clarification on my motivations, addressing each point the GM raised. In the campaign description, the Game Master mentioned that we'd need to, quote, forge alliances to defeat the curse. As we've been playing, it's become clear that there are multiple factions with their own motivations and goals. Isn't that the essence of political intrigue? I was hesitant about killing Isaac because we didn't have a clear plan for who would maintain order if we created a power vacuum in the town. Still, I even tried to block the idea entirely. I did threaten Irina with a knife to try to drive away Strahd when he first appeared and threatened to kill us all. It was a bluff. It didn't work, but still, no one got hurt. The Game Master described his campaign as, quote, gothic horror. Meanwhile, Irina, who seems to function as a DNPC, who was super annoying by the way, was urging us to murder Isaac in an alley, despite him having done no harm to the party or to her personally. Is that what he considers heroism? Game Master. It's clear for me now that there's a significant misalignment between your expectations and the game I'm running. I've made the difficult decision to remove you from the campaign. Before I could respond, I was swiftly removed from both the game and the Discord server. I didn't even get the chance to say goodbye to the group I'd been playing with for 4 months. At first, I was stunned, but then it hit me. I'd been kicked from a campaign that I'd paid for over 4 months, without any prior warning or opportunity to realign with the Game Master's vision. My take on the situation. It feels like the Game Master had already decided to remove me from the game before our conversation even began. I suspect I was considered a threat to the type of game he runs, aka railroading, due to my freedom of action and creativity that he admits in the messages. And somehow, all those years, I believed D&D was a cooperative storytelling tabletop game, not a novel dictated by a game master. Why I'm posting this? I reported this experience to startplaying.game support, hoping for assistance, but they declined to take any action. They simply suggested that I leave a review, which I did, giving 1 star. However, more than 24 hours later, my review still hasn't been published. I'm starting to feel like startplaying.games censors reviews and enables game masters to kick players without any warning, even after they've invested significant time and money. Update. Wow, thanks everyone for the feedback. I didn't expect so much activity. Startplaying.games published my review. The Game Master flagged my review, so it took an extra day for a moderator team to check the review. After that, the review was approved and published. Well, that has to suck to put that much time and money into a campaign, just for the DM to boot you for something that seems like it was just a misunderstanding. Heck, the DM even admitted that OP's character acting in a way that seemed like metagaming was probably just a coincidence. Yet, they still kicked OP anyway? Maybe the other players had complaints, and the Dungeon Master just thought it easier to just kick OP. I guess that's just a risk you take when joining a paid D&D game through sites like startplaying.games. I mean, you can't really force a Dungeon Master to keep anyone in a game. though there should be some sort of refund system in place. Yet, I can see dishonest players abusing a system like that too. So the whole thing just seems like a lose-lose situation. So all in all, it's my personal opinion to just avoid paid games in the first place. Though, what do you all think? But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.